I worked double shifts at the hospital for 31 years, so my son could have a life I never did. And the morning he looked me in the eye and said I was the reason he'd never amount to anything, I didn't cry. I just walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and thought, well, that's the last check I'll ever write for you. But let me back up, because this story didn't start that morning. It started the way most heartbreaks do, slowly, and then all at once. My name is Sylvia. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a small house in Guelph, Ontario, the same house I've owned for 22 years. I raised my son Theo here on my own, after his father left when Theo was 4. We didn't have much. Some winters, I chose between the heating bill and a proper Christmas, and I always chose the heating bill and told Theo Santa was running late. He believed me until he was 9. I'm not sure he ever fully forgave me for that particular truth, but that's beside the point. What I want to tell you about is the last 3 years. Theo is 27 now. He has his father's jaw and his grandmother's stubbornness, and somewhere along the way, I still can't pinpoint exactly when, he developed an idea that because I loved him, I owed him. Not in a cruel way at first. Children often confuse love with obligation. I understand that. What I don't understand, what I will never fully understand, is how a grown man can watch his mother work herself into exhaustion and feel not gratitude, but entitlement. It started when Theo told me he wanted to go to music school. He was 24. He'd spent 2 years after high school doing odd jobs: barista, delivery driver, a brief and disastrous stint at a landscaping company that ended when he threw his back out lifting a planter. He wasn't lazy, exactly. He just hadn't found his thing. And when he told me he wanted to produce music, I thought, okay, this could be it. He'd always been musical. He taught himself guitar at 12 on an instrument I found at a garage sale for $15. I used to hear him playing in his room late at night and think, there's something real in there. So I said yes. I said yes to the program at a private college in Toronto. $12,000 a year, which on a registered nurse's salary in semi-retirement meant I was pulling from savings I'd earmarked for my own future. I want to be honest about that. I knew what I was giving up. I made that choice with open eyes, because I believed in him. The first year was fine. Theo was excited. He called me every Sunday, told me about his projects, played me rough recordings over the phone that I listened to on my landline with the volume all the way up, nodding even though he couldn't see me. He seemed genuinely happy. I told myself, this is what it's for. All of it. This is what it's for. Then he met Jade Calloway. I want to be fair about Jade. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's 25 years old and very beautiful and very certain she knows exactly how the world works, which is a particular kind of dangerous at that age. She and Theo started dating in February of his second year. By April, he had stopped calling on Sundays. By June, he told me he needed a bigger monthly allowance because Toronto was expensive. I increased it by $300 a month. By September, he needed a new laptop. His old one wasn't adequate for the production software he was using, he said. I sent him $1,800. In November, he told me he wanted to record a proper EP, 6 songs, professional studio time, a mixing engineer. The quote he sent me was $4,200. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with that email open on my laptop, reading it twice. I want to say I hesitated. I want to say some part of me knew. But I transferred the money within 48 hours because I didn't want to be the reason he couldn't try. I have spent a lot of my life afraid of being the reason someone couldn't try. Christmas that year, Theo came home with Jade. It was the first time I met her in person. She was polite, the way people are polite when they're assessing something. She looked around my house the way you might look at a rental car, noting its condition, calculating its value, deciding whether it was worth being careful with. I noticed, but I told myself I was being uncharitable. She was nervous, probably. Meeting a boyfriend's mother for the first time is nerve-wracking. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Over dinner, Jade mentioned that she and Theo had been looking at apartments. Together? I asked. Well, Theo's been staying over most nights anyway, she said, as if this answered the question. Theo looked at his plate. I asked him later, when Jade had gone to bed, whether he was planning to move in with her. He said yes, probably in the spring. He said her family had a connection to a recording studio in Scarborough, and that Jade thought she could get him in to record there for a fraction of the usual cost. That's wonderful, I said. How much is a fraction? He named a number that was nearly what I'd already paid. I want to be clear. I don't begrudge my son having a girlfriend. I don't begrudge him wanting to build a life. What began to trouble me, as winter turned to spring, and spring turned to another tuition invoice, was that his life seemed to be expanding in all directions, and I was the one expected to fund every inch of it, while Jade's family, who apparently had industry connections, contributed nothing but advice. The apartment they moved into in March cost $2,300 a month. Theo told me his portion was $1,200. He asked if I could continue his monthly allowance, the $900 I'd been sending, plus cover half his rent until he had income from his music. I was 62 years old. I had reduced my shifts to 3 days a week because my knees weren't what they used to be. I was living carefully, the way you have to live when you've spent 3 decades giving more than you received. I said I could help with the allowance. I said I couldn't cover the rent. That was the first time Theo got angry with me. Not shouting. Theo has never been a shouter. It was worse than that. It was cold. He said he didn't understand why I was suddenly making things so difficult. He said he was so close to something real and he needed my support right now, at this critical moment. And that if I wasn't willing to help, then I wasn't as invested in his future as I claimed to be. I didn't sleep well that night. I increased the monthly transfer to $1,100. Please don't judge me, or go ahead and judge me. I've judged myself plenty. I know what it looks like from the outside. But when it's your child, the one you watch learn to walk on these floors, the one who used to fall asleep against your shoulder during car rides, it's not as simple as just saying no. Every time I thought about pulling back, I thought about all the ways I'd already fallen short, all the substitute Christmases, and the secondhand school supplies, and the birthday parties we couldn't really afford. I thought, maybe I owe him this. Maybe this is how I make it right. The summer was quiet. Theo posted music online. A few hundred plays here, a few hundred there. Jade was tagging his posts and promoting him to her followers, and she had a lot of followers, so I thought maybe things were moving. I followed his page on my phone and liked every post, which I know probably embarrassed him, but I didn't care. In August, Jade sent me a direct message. Not Theo. Jade. She said she wanted to talk to me about something that she thought I should hear from her directly. She said Theo had applied to a prestigious production mentorship program. 3 spots, highly competitive, based in Vancouver. He'd made it to the final round. The program required participants to fund their own relocation and living expenses for 4 months. She said Theo didn't want to ask me again so soon, but that this was genuinely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She attached a link to the program's website. It looked legitimate. She said the total they needed, between the move and 4 months of expenses, was $8,000. I sat with that message for 3 days. Something felt off. I couldn't name it precisely. The message was warm but somehow rehearsed. The way it was framed, Theo didn't want to ask, made it seem generous, but it also meant Jade had decided to ask on his behalf, which struck me as odd. Why wouldn't Theo call me himself? I called him. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he'd been expecting my call. I asked him to tell me about the Vancouver program. He talked for 10 minutes. He knew all the details. The mentors' names, the studio partnerships, the alumni who'd gone on to work with known artists. He was convincing. He was my son, and he was passionate, and for a moment I let myself feel it with him. Then I asked, "Did you tell Jade to message me?" A pause. "She offered," he said. "She thought it would be easier coming from her." "Easier for whom?" Another pause. I asked him to send me the official acceptance letter from the program. He said it was still being processed. I said I'd like to see it before making any decisions. He said he wasn't sure I trusted him. I said I was sure I trusted him, but that $8,000 was a significant amount of money, and I didn't think wanting documentation was unreasonable. The call ended shortly after that. Not badly, exactly, but with a kind of tension that sat on my chest for days. The letter arrived 10 days later. It was a PDF. It looked official. But when I Googled the program name and the organization listed at the top, I found only a single web page. Sparse, recently created based on the copyright year, no social media presence, no news mentions, no alumni testimonials, beyond 3 generic quotes with no last names attached. "I'm a nurse," I've spent 31 years in environments where missing information means something. I know how to look for what isn't there. I called a friend of mine, Barbara Fitch, who'd spent 30 years in arts administration before she retired. I described what I'd found. I read her the program details. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sylvia, I've never heard of this organization, and I would have." I asked her to look into it. She came back to me 2 days later. The company was registered, technically, but it had no track record, no physical address beyond a P.O. box in Vancouver, and it had been incorporated only 14 months ago. Not by anyone connected to the music industry as far as she could tell. I cannot tell you what that felt like. Even writing it now, I feel the way I felt sitting in my living room that afternoon in September. Holding the phone, understanding what I was looking at. My son had not lied to me outright. But someone had put together something designed to look real enough that I would write a check without asking too many questions. And Theo, whether he knew the full picture or had simply chosen not to look too closely, had handed me that something and asked me to believe it. I sat with it for a week. I kept going over it, looking for an innocent explanation. I wanted so badly to find one. I called Theo. I told him what I'd found. I didn't accuse. I laid out the facts calmly, the way I'd learned to do in 30 years of difficult conversations at bedsides and intake desks. I told him I'd spoken to Barbara Fitch. I told him what she'd said. I told him I wasn't comfortable transferring money for a program I couldn't verify. He didn't get angry right away. First, he was dismissive. Said I was overthinking it. Said the internet wasn't always up to date. Said Barbara Fitch wasn't omniscient. Then he said that this was exactly the kind of thing that had held him back his whole life. I asked him what he meant, he said. And I will remember this for the rest of my life. Word for word, he said. You've never actually believed in me. You've thrown money at the problem so you didn't have to feel guilty about all the ways you failed me growing up. That's not support, Mom. That's a transaction. And I'm done pretending it means something. I didn't respond right away. I think I said very quietly, "I see," and then I said, "I'll be in touch." I hung up the phone. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. I stood at the window, looking out at my back garden, which I'd planted this summer. I turned 50 as a promise to myself that I would eventually have time for beautiful things. I stayed at that window for a long time. I didn't call him back that night. I didn't call him back the following week. I thought carefully about what I wanted to do, because I've learned at 63 that decisions made in the raw heat of hurt tend to be the ones you regret. I wanted to act from clarity, not from pain. What I decided was this. I stopped the monthly transfer, not dramatically. Not with a long letter full of ultimatums. I simply didn't send it. And when the following month came, I didn't send it again. Theo called after the first missed transfer. I let it go to voicemail. He said he thought there might be an error with the bank. I texted back, "No error. I'll call you soon." He called again 3 days later. I answered. He asked what was happening. I told him that I had thought very carefully about what he'd said to me, and that I believed he had meant it. And that I thought it was important to honor what people tell you when they're being honest. He had told me my support was a transaction, not real belief in him. So I was ending the transaction. If he wanted my actual support, my time, my presence, my genuine care, that had never cost him anything and never would. But the financial transfers were done. He said I was punishing him. I said I was listening to him. He said that wasn't fair. I said I agreed that a lot of things hadn't been fair. And that fairness was something I'd been thinking about quite a bit lately. He brought up all the years, all the things he hadn't had, everything I'd put him through by raising him alone without enough money. I let him say it. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I said, "I know it was hard. I know I couldn't give you everything. I did give you everything I had. And somewhere along the way, everything I had stopped being enough, and I started giving you things I didn't have. I'm done doing that now. Not because I'm angry. Because I need to take care of myself." He hung up. The following weeks were very quiet. I won't pretend it was easy. I missed him with a physical ache, the way you miss a limb. I'd wake up in the night and think about calling him, and then I'd remember what he said. "You've never actually believed in me." And something in me would go still. I talked to my friend Margaret Hollowell, who I've known since nursing school, who has 4 children of her own, and the kind of wisdom that comes from having survived things. She listened. to the whole story without saying much. When I finished, she said, "You know what the hardest part of loving someone is? Letting them be wrong about you. I've thought about that every day since." Jade's social media, which I stopped looking at intentionally, but occasionally saw through mutual connections, showed her and Theo still in Toronto. No Vancouver, no mentorship. In January, I saw a post of them at what looked like a New Year's party. Theo was smiling, which both relieved me and broke my heart at the same time. I didn't reach out. In February, 5 months after I stopped the transfers, Theo came to Guelph. He didn't call ahead. He showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, which I knew because I saw his car in my driveway from the front window when I came home from my morning shift. I sat in my own car for a moment, gathering myself. Then I went inside. He was sitting on the front step. He looked thinner, tired. He had the expression I remembered from when he was small and had done something he knew was wrong and couldn't figure out how to say so. I unlocked the door and said, "Come in. I'll put the kettle on." We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd read his email about the studio time. The same table where I'd sat with Barbara Fitch's news, and he was quiet for a long time. I didn't fill the silence. I've learned, late in life, that silence is often the only space where true things can surface. He said, "I looked into the Vancouver thing more. After you said what you said, I waited. Jade's cousin set it up. He does consulting or something. She thought it would help me, get me taken seriously." He stopped. "I don't think she thought it would go as far as it did. I don't know what she thought." I said, "What do you think?" He was quiet again then. "I think I wanted it to be real badly enough that I didn't ask the right questions." I nodded. "I said some things to you," he said, "that weren't. I said things I didn't mean. Or that I meant in the moment but they weren't right." I said, "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for the money back. I'm not asking you to start again. I didn't want you to think that's what I think of you. What I said. I don't think that." I looked at my son across my kitchen table, 27 years old. Still so young, really, even if neither of us felt it. I said, "I know that too." I told him I wasn't ready to resume financial support and that I didn't know if I ever would be. Not because I was punishing him, but because I had genuinely reached the end of what I was able to give in that way, and I needed to be honest about that. I told him I loved him without condition. I told him that was different from funding without condition. He nodded. He didn't argue. We drank our tea. I asked him about his music, his actual music, the things he was making on his own without a program or a studio's or someone's cousin's scheme. He talked for a while. Some of it was genuinely good, a concept he was developing, a sound he was chasing. I listened the way I'd listened to those phone recordings on my landline years ago, with the volume all the way up. Before he left, he hugged me at the door. He said, "I'm sorry, Mum." I held on for a moment longer than I probably needed to. Then I let go, and I watched him drive away. And I went back inside to my garden, which had just started to come up again after the winter. The first green things pushing through the cold ground, quietly insisting on themselves, the way living things do when they've decided to keep going. I'm not sure what comes next for Theo and me. I know that love doesn't expire even when it has to change shape. I know that I am not the reason he struggled, and I am not the reason he'll succeed, and both of those things used to feel like failure but are starting, slowly, to feel like the truth. I take my 3 shifts a week. I tend my garden on the days in between. I have tea with Margaret Hollowell on Thursdays, and sometimes we talk about our children and sometimes we don't. My son is finding his own way. And for the first time in a very long time, so am I.